My name is Clara, and I am replaying a voice note I never thought my sister would send me. She is crying so hard I can barely hear the words. Dad is talking about selling the house. Mom has stopped answering her phone, and the same people who called me selfish are now saying I am the only one who can stop this. 3 months ago, they were already spending my money in their heads, before I even touched it. When my company sold, people expected me to feel light. That is the word everyone kept using. Light, free, rewarded. I smiled when they said it, but inside I felt the opposite. I felt that old pressure in my chest, the one I used to get as a kid whenever I heard my parents arguing about bills in the kitchen and knew my name would somehow end up inside the solution. The sale closed on a Tuesday afternoon. The number looked unreal on the screen. $8.8 million. After taxes, fees, and the rest, it was still more money than anyone in my family had ever seen up close. My husband Ben was standing beside me when the lawyer called. He hugged me. He told me he was proud of me. He told me to breathe. I remember laughing for a second, and then I remember going quiet. He noticed it right away. Ben has always known the difference between my happy silence and my afraid silence. He asked what I was thinking, and I told him the truth. I was not thinking about the house we could buy, or the vacation we had postponed for 4 years, or the freedom of never checking a grocery receipt twice. I was thinking about my sister Paige asking if this meant I could finally help with Noah's tuition. I was thinking about my father mentioning property taxes. I was thinking about my mother saying this blessing had come to the whole family. None of that had happened yet, but it did not need to. I knew the script. I had been living inside some version of it for years. I was the reliable one. That sounds flattering when people say it at dinner. It sounds like love. It sounds like respect. But in my family, reliable had started to mean absorbent. I paid when something went wrong. I covered the shortfall. I stepped in before embarrassment reached the neighbors. At first it was small, a medical bill my parents swore they would repay, a missed car payment for Paige after her husband lost work, a deposit for my nephew's school when the deadline was suddenly tomorrow. Each time, it came wrapped in gratitude. Each time, I told myself it was temporary. What I did not see at first was how help can curdle when it repeats. The first time you rescue people, they thank you. The 10th time, they start arranging their lives around your rescue. The language changes. They do not say please, they say family. They do not say, can you? They say, we thought you would. And before long, one person in the house stops being a daughter, or a sister, or a human being with limits. She becomes the emergency fund with a pulse. Ben listened while I said all of that out loud. Then he said something I laughed at for a full 3 seconds before I realized he was serious. Tell them the deal collapsed. He said, tell them there was a dispute, a clawback, penalties, whatever they will believe. Tell them the money is gone and watch who calls to ask if you are okay. And who calls to ask what happened to their plans. I told him that was cruel. He told me maybe. Then he asked a question I could not answer. If you truly had nothing tomorrow, Clara, who in your family would make room for you without turning it into a debt? That was the question that changed everything. Not who loved me when I was useful. Not who praised me when I won. Who would make room for me if I fell? So that night, I called Paige. She answered on the second ring, already bright, already eager. She had probably been refreshing my messages all afternoon. I could hear a television in the background and one of the kids yelling for juice. She said, so, tell me everything. I made myself sound tired. I told her there had been a dispute after closing. I said a big chunk of the funds was frozen, the rest eaten by legal cleanup and taxes, and by the time it was over, there was nothing left for me personally. There was a long pause. Not the kind that comes from concern, the kind that comes from subtraction. She said, wait, what do you mean nothing left? I repeated it. Then her voice dropped into that sharp little register I had heard my whole life whenever reality stopped matching her expectations. She said that could not be right. She said I was too careful, too smart, too paranoid actually, which she used to make fun of. Then, almost without transition, she started talking about her own situation. Noah's tuition was due in 2 weeks. The kitchen contractor had already started and they were short on materials. Her husband's hours had not gone back up. Summer camp deposits were non-refundable. She kept layering the problems like the weight of them might make my answer change. I said I was sorry. I said I knew this was bad timing. I said I had nothing to give. She exhaled so hard I thought the call had cut out. Then she said something that stayed with me. She said, "But we already counted on that money. Not hoped for it, not dreamed about it. Counted on it." I asked her why she would count on money that had never belonged to her. She got defensive right away. She said I was twisting her words. She said after everything she had done for me growing up, I was acting like a stranger. That part almost made me laugh, because what she meant by everything she had done for me was mostly letting me borrow her clothes in high school and once driving me to the airport at 5 in the morning. But that is how these stories work inside families. Memory gets edited until convenience starts looking like sacrifice. When I repeated that I could not help, her sympathy evaporated. She told me I should have protected the deal better. She said this kind of mistake ripples onto other people. Then she grew quiet again, but this time with anger. Before hanging up, she said, "I just hope Mom and Dad already have another plan." The next morning, I called my parents together. My mother, Elaine, answered first. She sounded soft, worried, almost tender. For a few minutes, I thought maybe I had been unfair. She asked if I had slept. She asked if Ben was being supportive. She asked if I was in shock. Then my father got on speaker. He asked one practical question about the deal. I answered. Then he moved immediately to taxes on the lake property. My mother brought up a dental procedure she had postponed because she thought things would be easier now. My father said he had already told a friend he could settle an old debt this month. He said it the way a man complains about weather, as though all of us were victims of the same neutral storm. I asked them both the same thing I had asked Paige. Why were they making commitments with money that was never theirs? My father got offended so fast it was almost impressive. He said that was not fair. He said families plan together. He said my success had opened a door for everyone. My mother started crying, but even through the tears she kept talking about timing, pressure, obligations, how embarrassed they would be now. Not once did either of them ask if I needed anything. There is a point in some conversations where the floor disappears under your feet, not because something new happened, but because something old becomes impossible to misunderstand. That call was that point for me. I saw it all at once. The years of emergencies. The confidence with which they had spent my energy. The way my no always became my betrayal, while their dependence kept being renamed love. Money in families does something strange when it stays unexamined. It bends moral language. Need starts wearing the mask of loyalty. Expectation starts dressing itself up as trust. By the time someone tries to set a boundary, everyone acts as if the boundary itself is the violence. That is how people stay trapped for years. Not because they cannot see the problem, but because the problem keeps arriving dressed as virtue. 2 hours after that call, my father texted that we needed to talk face to face. Not wanted. Needed. I wrote back and told them they could come to my house on Saturday at 2. I did not choose a restaurant. I did not choose my parents' kitchen, where memory always bent in their favor. I chose my living room, where I could end the conversation if I needed to. Before they arrived, I printed 7 years of records. Every transfer, every wire, every rushed payment, every bill I covered while being told it was just for now. I highlighted the mortgage payment I made for my parents when Dad's retirement account was locked up. The balance I cleared on Paige's credit card so her interest would stop multiplying. The orthodontist invoice for Noah. The roof repair. The furnace replacement. The 2 months of rent I quietly sent Paige after her husband lost his contract work. I also printed the text messages that came with those requests because numbers alone can still be argued with. It is harder to argue with your own words. By Saturday afternoon, my dining table looked like the office of someone preparing for trial. Paige arrived first, tense and already wounded in the face, as if I had dragged her into something cruel. My parents came right behind her. My mother looked tired. My father looked irritated in the way men look when they think a younger woman is about to become inconvenient. Ben stayed in the room but said almost nothing. I did not need backup for the facts. I only needed a witness to the weather. We sat down. No one touched the coffee. My mother began with a speech about how hard the last few days had been. My father said we needed to be realistic and not emotional. Paige said the whole family was under stress, and this was exactly the wrong moment for anyone to keep score. That word almost made me smile. Score. As if I had shown up with a grudge instead of a ledger of reality. I asked them a simple question before I handed over a single page. If I were the one in trouble, truly in trouble, who here would take me in for 6 months without turning it into a lecture, a debt, or a favor I would spend years repaying? Nobody answered. I waited. I did not rescue them from the silence. That silence was the answer. Paige finally said, "That was not the point. My father said I was being dramatic." My mother looked down at her hands and started crying again. I asked the question one more time, slower. If I lost my home or my income or my marriage, where would I go? Which house? Which room? Which one of you would say stay? Paige stared at the table. My father said of course we would help in whatever way made sense. I asked what that meant. He had no details. My mother said, "You know we love you." But love without a room, without a meal, without a practical answer, was not what they had been demanding from me all these years. So I slid the folders across the table. At first they looked confused, then annoyed, then startled. My father opened his and saw the total on the first summary page. He blinked twice like the number was rude. Paige flipped faster, saw line after line of transfers, and immediately said, "Families should not itemize generosity." I told her I only started itemizing after she forgot a loan and later called it a gift. My father's jaw tightened. My mother kept crying, but softer now, as if the sound might still protect her from the facts. I told them why the records existed. Because memory gets slippery when money moves in one direction for too long. Because every time I said no, I became ungrateful in the family version of events. Because I was tired of being told I imagined the pattern while financing it. Paige accused me of humiliating them. My father said the binder was cold, transactional, ugly. I asked him what he thought our arrangement had been, if not transactional. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Ben spoke for the first time. He said he had watched my success become communal property every single time it appeared, and he had watched every boundary I tried to set get rewritten as selfishness. My father snapped that outsiders do not get to define family. Ben said maybe family should have done a better job defining itself. That was when the room broke. Paige started crying hard, then immediately turned that crying into accusation. She said I had changed. She said Ben had turned me against blood. My mother said this was all unnecessary, that no decent daughter would ever test her own parents like this. My father was angrier now, but underneath it, I could hear something else. Fear. And that was when I told them the truth. The deal had closed. The money was real. I had not lost anything in legal cleanup. I had lied because I needed to know whether there was still a version of our family that could see me without a dollar sign floating above my head. Nobody spoke for 2 full seconds. Then everyone spoke at once. My father called it manipulative. Paige called it cruel. My mother asked how I could do this to people who loved me. The interesting thing about those questions is that none of them sounded shocked by the lie itself. They sounded outraged that the test had taken away their ability to keep pretending. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I told them I was done being the automatic rescue plan. No more emergency transfers. No more fixing the consequences of decisions I did not make. No more being informed after the fact that my money had already been emotionally assigned to someone else's life. That did not mean I was abandoning them. It meant the arrangement had changed. If they wanted help creating a budget, I would pay for a financial planner. If they needed to sell assets, I would connect them with someone honest. If my parents had debts, I would help them organize the paperwork. If Paige needed to cut spending, I would sit with her and do the numbers. But I would not hand over cash so everyone could keep living inside the fantasy that my success existed to soften their choices. They hated that even more than a full no. A full no lets people play victim. A structured no makes them confront the parts they could fix themselves. Paige said her kids should not suffer because I had trust issues. My father said offering systems instead of money was insulting. My mother said she did not understand why I had become so hard. I almost answered her with the truth. I had not become hard. I had become accurate. There is something no one tells the child who keeps the peace. If you do it long enough, people stop seeing peace as a gift and start seeing it as your job. The same thing happens with money. The same thing happens with patience. The same thing happens with forgiveness. Eventually, the family does not ask whether you can carry more. They just stack more weight on your arms and call you strong. I stood up. That was the end of the meeting. Ben opened the front door. Not rudely, just clearly. My father left first, furious that clarity had entered the room. My mother followed, stunned that tears had not rescued the script. Paige lingered long enough to say I would regret humiliating my own family. I told her maybe, but I would regret another 10 years of financing silence more. Over the next week, I changed everything that had made the old pattern easy. I canceled the standing transfer that went to my parents on the 1st of every month. I removed myself from a small line of credit I had quietly helped Paige qualify for. I updated my estate plan. I changed the passwords on the few subscriptions I had been paying for without even thinking about it. I wrote down, in one private document, exactly what I would and would not do going forward, because boundaries that live only in emotion are easier to bargain with than boundaries written in ink. The backlash came fast. I was called dramatic, cold, ungrateful, brainwashed by my husband, rich and therefore arrogant. It would have destroyed me once. This time, it sounded like people shouting at a locked door because they could not believe the hallway had ended. And then something I had not expected happened. The silence after the backlash did not feel lonely. It felt clean. I slept through the night. I ate dinner without checking my phone for emergencies that were never really emergencies. Ben and I took a long weekend to a place with no cell service and spent 2 days talking about books, stupid movies, and what it might feel like to build a life that was not interrupted every time someone in my family refused to plan ahead. I started mentoring women founders again. I set up a scholarship in my grandmother's name for first-generation college students. For the first time, my money moved in directions I chose before guilt chose them for me. People think the biggest thrill in stories like this is revenge. It is not. Revenge is loud. What came after was quiet. And quiet, I learned, was what I had really been buying for other people all along while living without enough of it myself. That is why I do not agree when people say boundaries destroy families. Boundaries do not destroy what is healthy. They reveal what the relationship was feeding on. A bond built on respect can survive adjustment. A bond built on access will call adjustment an attack. Once I understood that, I stopped confusing their panic with proof that I was doing something wrong. 3 months passed. Then this morning, Paige's voice note arrived. She said Dad was talking about selling the house now because things had gotten worse than they expected. She said Mom had been crying for days and was not taking calls. She said she knew they had all been wrong. She said this had gone too far. Then she sent a photo of my parents sitting at the kitchen table under a pile of envelopes and paperwork, both of them looking smaller somehow, as if the life they had been postponing had finally come to collect itself in one room. I looked at that photo for a long time. Not because I felt tempted to rush in and fix it, because I was trying to understand what I felt at all. There was sadness. Yes. I am not made of stone. There was anger too, but duller now, older. There was even guilt, or maybe just the leftover shape of guilt, the kind that stays in your body after the logic has left. But stronger than all of it was clarity. An apology is not the same thing as a changed structure. A crisis is not proof of a changed heart. Desperation can make people sound honest when they are simply cornered. Maybe Paige meant every word. Maybe watching the house shake finally scared her into seeing what I had carried for years. Maybe my parents are truly frightened now, truly humbled, truly ready to stop confusing love with access. That is possible. I do not need to call them monsters to protect myself. I only need to remember the version of me that sat in my own living room, asked one simple question, and got silence back. If I meet them, it will not be because panic pulled me by the throat. It will not be because their emergency erases my boundary. It will be because I choose the terms with open eyes, No hidden assignments, no emotional invoices, no role waiting for me at the table except my own. For most of my life, I thought being needed was the closest thing to being loved. I do not believe that anymore. Need can be hungry. Need can be selfish. Need can look straight at your exhaustion and still ask for one more thing. Love knows when to stop asking. So yes, I may reply to the voice note. I may agree to one meeting, in one public place, with one clear limit. Or I may not. But either way, one thing has already been decided. I am never going back to the version of my life where my worth arrives first as a solution to someone else's mess.